this off from the News Gazette, and then the rest of the guys can jump in.
All right. Well, Coach, I guess, in the release last night, you said the decision, to retire was maybe a tough one. Just what kind of all went into your decision-making process there?
Yeah, it was hard. It was real hard. And any time you're going to leave, really your life's work, and you've done something for 33 years. I started wrestling when I was 8 years old. So coaching for 33 or 34 of those years, and wrestling is from 8 years old to 23 years old. That's a long time to do anything, and to leave the sport, it was tough. But I think at the end of the day, I've been doing this a long time. My energy levels are starting to drop a little bit. Things are starting to become a chore. And I don't think that's not what this has been for 33 years for me. This has been fun. It's been enjoyable. It's been my passion. It's been my life's work. And it's starting to become work. And I don't want my energies level to affect the program and where the program's going. I spoke to Josh about this in the fall, is when this whole thing started. My decision making, and after the national tournament this year, we sat down and kind of worked on a timeline, and it just, the way it worked out, yesterday was the day to announce it, and I made the decision. We announced it yesterday.
So did the strangeness of the last year, did that play any part in maybe pushing you closer to this, or?
Over the course of a lot of years, the things you don't like and the things that are hard, just keep adding one more straw. The pandemic was a big one, big straw. It was a hard year. It was a really hard year. And for our guys to do what they did under the conditions they did them in was just remarkable to me. And I can't tell you how much admiration I have for them to get through this season, especially in a sport like ours, where obviously it's close contact, but to be able to live their lives the way they did and be able to be disciplined enough to do those things, and not having the luxury of going home and seeing their families and having their parents come and watch them wrestle. That's a big change for a kid who's 18 to 22 years old. But the sacrifices they made were unbelievable. But it was a challenging year. I mean, everything was different. Usually you can kind of look at a season and have kind of in your mind or on paper planning cycles and different things, but it was a daily thing. It was, something's going to change, and once it changes on Monday, by the time Wednesday rolls around, it's going to be different. And it was like that all year.
I guess, wrestling since you were 8, coaching for a little over 3 decades. Do you go cold turkey now, or what's the post-retirement plan?
The plan, I think, and my wife's retiring in May as well. But between the two of us, we've worked 63 years. I think we've kind of done our part in terms of cold turkey. I'm sure when the fall rolls around, I'll have some withdrawal symptoms for sure, not getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning, wondering what time I got it, or wondering why I'm not in the gym, why I'm not at weightlifting, why I'm not doing what I normally have done. But for right now, the plan on doing this, and we both kind of said the same thing, that the goal here was to do whatever you want, right? That's kind of the goal with retiring, is you put your time in and then you decide to do what you want. We've always enjoyed traveling, and we'll travel quite a bit. But neither of us have anything planned in the immediate. That could change, but right now, the goal is to do kind of what we choose to do.
And you've got 29 years invested in Illinois wrestling. And just what do you want to see maybe Josh, do, to kind of further the program?
Josh and I have talked about that, and I think it's important. And, to be somewhere for 29 years, continuity is important, right? And I think over that 29 years, we've had a lot of success, I think, in terms of national champions and All-Americans. And, we're one of 4 programs that have had an All-American in each of those years. That's good. And to do it over a 30-year period, pretty extraordinary. So I think there's some things that could be done for the betterment of the program, and I discussed those with Josh. But consistency is important to me, and obviously, needless to say, I want what's best for the program, and will be a huge fan, and just won't be the decision maker anymore.
Hey, Jim, it's J.R. Ogden from the Gazette. It's been a long time since we've talked. What are you gonna miss most, do you think?
JR, I didn't recognize you with the hair. You went to the same barber as me. That's how long it's been since I've seen you.
I've been this way for probably longer than you, Jim. So
I take that back. What will I miss the most? Interaction and relationships. That's the whole thing, and that's kind of what's kept me in it more than anything. I think as much as I love the sport, I love the age group of kids that are in college, and I love the competitiveness and the spirit and the fight and the mindset of these guys. Right, that's I really enjoy it. But building relationships with those guys, and Ken and I were talking about this before. When they come in as naive, sometimes somewhat immature 18-year-olds, and you watch them go out the door as a mature 22-year-old ready to take on the world. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. And but the relationships and being around those guys and watching them mature and grow up and become adults, that's my favorite part. What I won't miss is sitting on a bus at 3:00 in the morning, or being on the bus in the middle of the night when the bus is breaking down. The headache calls I won't miss, but the relationships with these guys is certainly the biggest thing.
Jim, do you expect anybody from your own staff to be considered, or is this going to be a wide search, or do you think it might happen internally?
Oh, I don't know that if I have an answer. I think they'll be considered internally for sure, and I think they should be. Beyond that, I don't know the length of the search. I don't know any of that. As many conversations as Josh and I and Warren and I have had since the decision has been made, the timeline of this and the length of it, and the decisions behind the scenes that I don't know and I'm not really going to be involved in. Those things have not been relayed to me.
During the pandemic, has anything happened that would indicate there might be fewer wrestling teams? Because there are some sports that have been dropped. Is there any concern that way?
There's always concern that way, I think, but it's amazing. As much as people want to put a spotlight on that, and the success of wrestling right now is at an all-time high. Right, we're the third most watched sport on the Big Ten Network by far. Our ratings nationally have grown incredibly. I think the number of people going to the national tournament in a non-pandemic year has grown astronomically to the point where it's tough to get a ticket. So our sport is growing. Our sport is getting more viewership. Our sport is getting more spectators. The shame of it is there are real financial concerns right now. And the sooner the world can get back to more of a normal life, I think the better. But there is always concern with our sport. I think there's always concern with a lot of sports at the college level. But I think we're on pretty steady ground. At least I like to think we're on pretty steady ground. And if, we made it through a year, which is really an amazing thing with everything going on. But I'd like to think we're on a solid footing, and we're, hopefully we'll have the opportunity to add some programs, to be honest.
Jim, I guess as a follow-up to one of Lauren's questions, where you got a couple guys on your staff that maybe could be head coaches, do you advocate for both of them? How does that work?
If I'm asked to advocate for either of them, I would. Those guys have been fantastic for our program. Jeremy Hunter's been here 19 years as an assistant. Mike Porter wrestled here, competed on the international level for several years. Went back to his home area, started a club from the ground up, started his own business, was a really successful high school coach or club coach for the junior levels, for 10 years before coming back to Champaign. So the experience obviously is there. I think, their desire to be here is obvious with the number of years they've been here. And the thing is, again, consistency is important. I think Jeremy's been here long enough where he knows there's not a greener pasture, right? There's not anything better on the other side of the tracks. He's made the decision to stay here, and I think it's been a conscious decision. I think Mike has been here, and there's not a Division I coaching job in the country he would rather have than the University of Illinois. This is his home. It's his alma mater. He had great success here as an athlete. He was a couple-time national runner-up, couple-time Big Ten champ. And quite honestly, there's no place he'd rather be. So those decisions they've made to be a part of this program are conscious decisions, and this is where they want to be, and that's important. That's really important.
I guess, for you, just what do you think is going to be like this fall, winter to maybe be in a gym and watching wrestling, but not being down there and coaching?
Well, it's kind of funny, during the course of the year, if we're home on a weekend, there's at least one match most of the time, 2 matches on a Friday night in the Big Ten Network. So I'll come home from practice, walk in the door, and my wife's watching wrestling. Sunday morning, if we're off, I'll get up, got something to do at office, we got practice or something, I'll come home noon or 1 o'clock. My wife's got the Big Ten Network on, watching wrestling. She's a junkie, and I think I've probably done that to her. I told her jokingly last night, I'm going to try to go cold turkey for a year, stay at a Huff gym for a year. And she looked at me like I was half crazy. So odds are she will drag me to those places, as she's a giant wrestling fan. Watching it from the seats is it's going to be a different experience, and I guess the parts of some of those things are that I won't miss, or being so nervous sometimes you want to black out, right? Being so nervous, I won't miss those things. I won't miss the sleepless nights. But the competitive juices are still there enough where if I go to a meet, my heart rate's certainly going to rise. I'm going to try to keep my mouth quiet and mind my business. But I'll have some withdrawals, and I'll have some. I hope I won't have any regrets. But I'll certainly have withdrawals, and again, this has been an important part of my life for 49 years, so I can't walk away.
Thank you.
Steve or Ray, you got questions for Jim? Steve, do you have anything for Jim? Let's see. Who's trying that? That's trying. Ray, do you have anything for Jim? You guys are muted. I don't know. Oh, he's got no question. All right. Steve, are you good? Okay. All right. Anything else? JR, you got anything for Coach?
Jim, I did want to, ask you. You came from, a program that was at the time, and I guess again this year was the standard bearer for college wrestling. And you worked for a lot of years with Mark, and then you didn't have the team success, winning national championships and things like that. But 90% of the teams don't. And was it tough at times? And is it tough for programs like Illinois when you're the Penn States and the Iowas and the Oklahoma States of the world continue to dominate the sport like they do?
You know, I guess the way I would answer that, it was no different when I was in school. You know, Coach Gable, we dominated the sport. And I think it's one of those deals, it's made the sport better, right? Penn State has made a huge commitment. You know, most of the Big Ten has made a huge commitment, right? And the reason is you have to stay competitive. So I think the Iowa teams in the 80s made the level of college wrestling jump. I think, you know, in the 90s, again, you know, it's not Iowa, a lot of Oklahoma State. The 2000s have been Penn State. You know, it's one of those things that it's elevated our sport and made our sport is competitive, probably more competitive than it's ever been. So, you know, and being in this conference this long, it's a weekly thing. You know, everybody's good. But no, I think it's a healthy thing, and you know, those programs are doing things the right way, and in terms of winning. So, yeah, they're good. A lot of ground to make up.
Well, congratulations, and thanks for your time, Jim.
Welcome, JR. Thanks for being here from Iowa. But don't talk about him anymore when I'm talking about Illinois.
I see
Hey,
Steve.
Jim,
There you go.
Jim, what are you most proud of as you walk away?
Yeah, I think, you know, the biggest thing, you know, and we've always emphasized in this, our program since we got here, this is more about wrestling. This is about the next 50 years of these guys' lives, right? It's about more than the next 4 or 5 years of their lives. And, you know, the parents of the kids we recruit trust us enough with their kids for the next 4 or 5 years of their lives. It's critical that we give them back better. Right? That's important. So in terms of growth and development and maturity and independence and, you know, being able to think for themselves, being able to go out and have a great career, be a great father, be a great husband, be a great professional. Those are all things we talk about all the time. And those things are most important. And those things took precedence over winning. You know, we weren't going to sacrifice those things in those relationships just to win a wrestling match. We weren't going to do that. You know? So I think we've done things the right way. I think we've done things right for the kids in our program. And, you know, I couldn't be more proud of the guys we're producing and getting them off and set up again for the next 50 years. And that's kind of been the goal is to get these guys headed in the right direction for the next 50 years of their life.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Coach Heffernan? I don't hear any. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time with that today.
Thanks.
All right, Coach.